My name is Saul Wolcott, and I am 68 years old. The day my son's wife locked the pantry and told me it was so I would not eat too much, in the very house my money was helping pay for, was the day I finally woke up. For 8 years, I carried my family in silence. I never asked for thanks. I thought that was love. Then Whitney smiled at me from across a locked cabinet, and something in my chest went quiet and hard. She thought she was pushing an old man to the edge of his own life. She had no idea whose name was connected to nearly everything she owned. Let me take you back to that Sunday afternoon. That was the day the little lock appeared on the pantry door, and I finally saw my family clearly. It was a small brass lock, the kind someone might buy for a school locker. I had come in from the yard hungry after mowing. Out of habit, I reached for the pantry handle, but it did not move. A note was taped above it in Whitney's neat, round handwriting. It read, "Meal schedule inside. Please stick to it. Love you." I stood there for a moment. Then Whitney entered, drying her hands on a towel and wearing that bright church social smile. "Oh, Saul," she said gently, as though I were a child. "I hope you're not upset." "Just surprised," I told her. She tilted her head and said it was a health issue. According to her, Dr. Bramwell had said men my age needed to watch their portions, and she was only looking out for me. I looked from the lock to her. Nathan sat at the counter scrolling through his phone. He did not look up, but his shoulders were tight. He had heard every word. "That's thoughtful of you, Whitney," I said. "I'll remember it." She beamed as if I had handed her a prize. "See? I knew you'd understand." She patted my arm and floated back toward the living room, calling to Nathan about the party guest list. Nathan finally glanced at me. For half a second, something flickered across his face. Shame, perhaps. Then it disappeared, and he followed his wife out of the room. I remained in that kitchen for a long time, staring at a lock on a cupboard full of food I had helped pay for. That night, I could not sleep. Around midnight, I got up, went to the closet, and pulled down an old accordion folder I had not opened in years. My hands were not shaking. That surprised me most of all. To explain why, I need to go back. I built things for a living: cabinets, staircases, and entire kitchens for 40 years. My wife, Margaret, kept the books and kept me honest. We had a small house, modest savings, and a boy we loved more than good sense allowed. The carrying had begun long before the pantry lock. 8 years earlier, Nathan wanted to buy his first house. His credit was thin, his business was young, and the bank would not approve him. So, I co-signed. My name went on the mortgage so my boy could have a front door of his own. I signed from 3 states away, quietly, and never mentioned it again. Then Margaret passed 4 years ago after a fast, unforgiving illness. Once she was gone, the house became loud with quiet, and I sold the workshop. I could no longer stand the smell of cedar, because it smelled like her. Nathan asked me to move closer. "You shouldn't be alone, Dad," he said. I believed he meant it, and I still think he did at the time. So I packed up and came to this town, this cul-de-sac, and this new life. By then, he had met Whitney, married her quickly, and traded up to a larger house. My name followed onto the new mortgage. The atmosphere in the home had already changed, but I never told them how much I did to help. That was the point. A father does not hand his child a bill for being loved. Over those 8 years, whenever Nathan's credit could not stretch far enough for the life Whitney wanted, I stepped in quietly. My signature and my name were tucked into papers nobody bothered to read twice. I told myself it did not matter who knew. What mattered was that my boy stood on solid ground. In the folder that midnight, every document was still there, neat, dated, and real. Things throughout that house carried my name, and Whitney had never once looked closely enough to understand it. I put the folder back on the shelf. I was not ready to do anything with it. Not yet. But I could not unsee that lock, and I could not stop wondering exactly when I had become a guest in a home I was quietly holding up. To understand the rest, you need to understand something about Whitney. She had 2 faces, and she wore them like coats. There was the porch face, warm, laughing, and generous. She waved at neighbors, called people hun, brought casseroles to anyone who was unwell, and posted the pictures. Everyone on the street thought Nathan had married an angel. Then there was the kitchen face, the one that appeared when the blinds were closed. I saw it most often around money. Whitney tracked every dollar in that house like a hawk over a field. She would sigh over grocery receipts and glance at me while doing it. "Groceries again?" she said one evening, tapping the total. Funny how quickly a pantry empties with an extra mouth. Nathan said nothing. He never did. She had a way of aiming at people sideways. There was never a direct accusation, only a comment, a look, or a little laugh that told me exactly where I stood. The next morning, our neighbor Carol leaned over the fence while I trimmed the hedges. "Saul, you're so lucky," she said. "Whitney takes such good care of you. Not many young wives would." I smiled and thanked her. What else could I do? Carol knew the porch face. She had never sat at our kitchen table after the guests were gone. Through the window, I watched Whitney laugh easily on the phone. The moment she hung up, her face went flat. Then she took out a clean sheet of paper, wrote something, and taped it to the refrigerator. From the yard, I could not read it, but I had a feeling my name was on it. I was right. I also want to be fair to my son, so let me tell you who Nathan used to be. When he was 7, he found an injured sparrow in the driveway. He kept it in a shoebox for a week and fed it with an eyedropper. He cried when the little bird did not make it. That was Nathan, soft in the best way. At 12, he stood up to a boy twice his size to protect a smaller child. He came home bruised and never once bragged about it. He had a backbone then. I do not know exactly when he lost it. It happened slowly, the way rust happens, with a little more surrender every year until the shape of him bent around Whitney and stayed bent. By then, he flinched before he spoke. He checked Whitney's face before answering simple questions. My boy, who had once stood up to someone twice his size, could not meet my eyes across his own dinner table. One evening, I found him alone in the garage pretending to sort screws. "Nathan," I asked, "are you all right?" "Fine, Dad," he answered far too quickly. "Would you tell me if you weren't?" He looked at me, and for a second the boy I remembered was back, drowning behind a grown man's face. "It's just easier," he said quietly, "when everybody is happy." "Everybody?" I asked. "Or Whitney?" He did not answer. He returned to the screws. I rested a hand on his shoulder and told him he was a good man who had simply forgotten how to stand up. He did not pull away, but he did not turn around either. I left him in the garage with his sorted screws and his carefully sorted silence, thinking about how a person can lose himself one small surrender at a time. I would have done anything to reach him. I simply did not yet understand what that would cost. That Thursday, I drove into town to see Marcus Reyes. Marcus had handled my finances for 20 years. He had worked with Margaret on our accounts and never once talked down to me. We met at the diner on 4th Street, the one with the good pie. "You look tired, Saul," he said. "I've been better," I answered. We made small talk for a while. Then he set down his coffee and got to the point, the way he always did. He wanted to review the accounts. I nodded. He pulled a folder from his bag and laid it flat between us. There it all was. The mortgage I had co-signed so Nathan could qualify, the 2 car loans backed by my name, and the credit line the entire family used, secured by my good financial standing. 8 years of quiet carrying sat in black ink between us. "You've been generous," Marcus said carefully. "More generous than most fathers I've met." "I made a choice," I told him. "You did," he replied. Then he studied me and asked whether everything was all right at the house. I did not answer immediately. Outside, a school bus rolled past while a woman walked a small dog. "They put a lock on the pantry," I finally said. "For my health." Marcus went quiet, then tapped the folder. "You know something, don't you? You can remove yourself from these obligations legally and cleanly. It only takes proper notice and the right paperwork." "I know," I said. "I'm not telling you what to do," he replied. "I'm only reminding you that the door is there if you ever want it." I closed the folder and slid it back toward him. "I do not have any plans," I said. At the time, I meant it. But as I drove home, I found myself calculating how much one person can carry before the carrying itself finally breaks him. Whitney had friends over that Saturday. 2 couples from the neighborhood came for dinner. Wine glasses were out, candles were lit, and Whitney was in her element because she loved an audience. I was invited to eat, but even the invitation came with a leash. She served the guests first, generous portions of roast chicken, potatoes, and green beans shining with butter. When she reached me, she set down a much smaller plate with a thin slice of chicken breast, 1 spoonful of plain vegetables, and no bread. "Portion control," she announced lightly. "We're keeping Saul healthy." The guests gave uncertain little laughs. One woman glanced at my plate, then quickly looked away. "Doctor's orders," Whitney added, patting my hand as though I were a well-behaved child. I looked at my little plate, then at the serving platter in the center of the table, still more than half full. I could have said something. 50 thoughts lined up behind my teeth. Instead, I picked up my fork and told Whitney, the food looked delicious. She glowed. Nathan stared at his own plate and ate too quickly. The conversation moved on to vacations and school districts. I became invisible again, which was how Whitney preferred me at her table. Present enough to complete the family picture, quiet enough to ignore. After dinner, while I dried dishes in the kitchen, I heard Whitney's voice drifting in from the porch. She was speaking to the other couple in a low, amused tone. I caught only 3 words. "Bless his heart." Then they laughed. I set down the towel. My hands were steady, but my chest was not. I told myself the same thing I always did. Just keep the peace. Just let my son be happy. It does not matter what I have to swallow. I believed that for 1 more week. I was wrong, and I was about to learn exactly how wrong, through a phone call I never saw coming. My daughter Delia called that Sunday night. She lives 3 states away, works as a nurse, and says exactly what she thinks. She is Nathan's cousin by blood, and my daughter by every measure that counts. Margaret and I raised her after her parents passed. She was 34, sharp as a tack, and fiercely protective of me. "Hey, Dad," she said. Then she paused. "You sound off. What's wrong?" "Nothing," I said. "Just tired." "Don't do that," she replied. "Not with me." I sat on the edge of the bed while the house stayed quiet around me. Whitney and Nathan were asleep down the hall. "It's small," I told her. "It sounds silly, really." "Then tell me the silly thing," she said. So I told her about the lock, the note, and the tiny plate at the dinner party. The line went completely silent. When Delia spoke again, her voice had an edge I had never heard before. "She locked food away from you in the house where you live?" "She says it's for my health," I answered. "Dad," Delia said after a sharp breath, "do you even remember what you're paying for over there?" I did not answer. "The mortgage, both cars, and that credit line they live on. Do you remember?" "I remember, sweetheart. And she is rationing your dinner." Delia laughed, but there was no humor in it. Dad, listen to me, she said. I've heard things from Nathan and from someone who used to be close to Whitney. Things Whitney has been saying. My grip tightened around the phone. What things? I do not want to explain it until I check what is true, she said. Let me look into it first. Promise me you will not simply accept this. Promise me. Delia, I said. Promise me, Dad. All right, I answered. I promise. She ended the call to make a few of her own. I sat in the dark for a long time because Delia knew something about my daughter-in-law that I did not, and whatever it was had frightened her. 2 days later, she called again. It was early, and her voice had the careful tone nurses use when the news is difficult. I spoke to Renata, she said, Whitney's old roommate. Delia continued. They stopped being friends years ago. Do you want to know why? Tell me. Whitney did this before, Dad, with her own aunt. She moved in, claiming she wanted to help, took control of the finances, pushed the woman toward a care facility, and walked away with what remained. Renata watched it happen. I stood completely still in the kitchen. The locked pantry was only 2 feet from my hand. That is a serious thing to say about someone, I told her. It is a serious thing to watch happen twice, Delia replied. I heard papers moving on her end. There is more. Nathan let something slip last month. Whitney has been pushing him to consider assisted living for you. She has already compared prices. My stomach dropped. Nathan would never do that. He is not the one driving this, Dad, Delia said. She is. Then her voice cracked. This is the part that made me feel sick. Whitney asked whether your pension checks would follow you if you moved. She wanted to know whether the money would stay in the house. The room seemed to tilt. I placed one hand flat against the counter. For 4 years, I had told myself I was family there, a father who was welcome and loved. Meanwhile, the woman running the house had been measuring me for a smaller room and counting my pension while she did it. Dad, are you still there? Delia asked. I'm here. Do not confront her yet, she said. Let me get everything straight first. I will not say a word, I promised, and I did not. But after the call, alone in the kitchen, I opened my folder again. This time, I read every page slowly, from the first line to the last. Whitney had even done the math on my pension. The paper on the refrigerator turned out to be a meal schedule with my name printed across the top. Breakfast, half portion, no snacks. Specific times were listed like a hospital chart. She had made it public without saying a word to me. Every neighbor who wandered into the kitchen could read it, and they did. Carol stopped by to borrow a casserole dish. She saw the chart, read it, and gave me a look I will never forget. Thin, cold pity. That's very organized, she said uncertainly. It's for his health, Whitney called from the sink. You know how men are at his age. They would eat the whole house if you let them, Whitney continued. Carol gave the small, nervous laugh of someone who did not know where to look. I stood in my own family's kitchen with a feeding schedule taped to the refrigerator like a warning. It became worse at the neighborhood barbecue that weekend. Whitney held court beside the grill, telling the story of the pantry lock as though it were charming. He kept sneaking cookies, she said, and the neighbors chuckled. Like a little boy, so we had to lock it for his own good. I had not touched a cookie in months, but her story was more entertaining than the truth, so the truth did not matter. We only want Saul to be healthy, she told them with one hand over her heart. Don't we, everyone? People murmured agreement. A few glanced at me with the same pity. I smiled and said nothing. That was the leash working exactly as designed. But beneath the paper plates and small talk, something in me had finished bending. I was no longer sad. I was clear. That night, I called Marcus and said the words I had not been ready to say before. I want to know my options, I told him. All of them. We met at the diner the next morning. Marcus did not gloat or say he had warned me. He simply opened the folder and walked me through every page. You can withdraw as co-signer on the mortgage, he explained. It will not erase the loan. It will place full responsibility on Nathan and Whitney, and the lender will reassess the terms. The same applies to the cars. The credit line secured by your name can be closed. It is all legal and complete. You give proper written notice. 30 days is more than fair. Everything stays above board. No tricks. I turned my coffee cup in a slow circle. Here is what I need you to understand, Marcus. I am not doing this to punish anyone, I said. I am not going to sneak around. I know, he answered. I will warn Nathan and give him a real chance. If he wants to learn how to carry the responsibility himself, I will help him. Marcus nodded slowly. That is more grace than Whitney would give you. It is not for her, I said. It is for me. I will not become a man who ruins people, even people who have treated me badly. Marcus smiled, tired and warm. I have watched people handle money for 50 years, he said. Most people in your position would tear everything apart out of spite. You are choosing the harder path. The clean path, I replied. Sometimes they are the same thing. We shook hands over pie. Then I signed the first authorizations in that diner booth, giving Marcus permission to prepare the paperwork. Driving home, I felt something I had not felt in years. It was not anger, and it was not relief. It was steadiness. One thing still had to happen before any change took effect. I needed to look my son in the eye and give him the chance his wife never would. I found Nathan alone the following Sunday, while Whitney was out buying groceries. We stood in the driveway, the same place where he had found that sparrow 30 years earlier. Son, I need to ask you something, I said. Do you know whose name is on this house? He frowned. Ours. Mine and Whitney's. Mine too, I told him. I co-signed. You could not have qualified without me. He shifted his weight. Dad, that was years ago. Whitney handles the paperwork now. Does she? I asked. Do you ever read it? She says I do not need to. He would not look at me. Then he asked whether I was feeling all right. Whitney had told him I was forgetting things. There it was. She said that? I asked. She's worried, he replied. We both are. She thinks you may be getting confused about Mama and mixing old memories with current ones. I studied my son for a long moment. Nathan, I built cabinets to 1/16 of an inch for 40 years. I am not confused. She is telling you I am, so you will stop listening to me. He blinked. Something moved across his face. Perhaps doubt. Perhaps the first crack. That's not true, he started. She wouldn't. Ask her to show you the current mortgage papers, I said. Ask her whose signature appears at the bottom. Dad, he began. Just ask her, son. Whitney's car turned onto the street. Nathan straightened quickly, like a child who feared being caught. Do not tell her we talked about this, he said. Please. There it was again. The flinch, the peace, at any price. But I had planted the seed. Whitney had spent months telling my son I was losing my mind, so he would never trust anything I said. Her whole plan depended on that lie, and a lie like that survives only until someone sees the paperwork. Whitney must have sensed something shifting because she tightened her control. First, my mail began disappearing. I would see a notice one day and find it gone the next. When I asked, she smiled. I've been sorting it for you, Saul, so you do not get overwhelmed. Then she moved on to my phone calls. Delia later told me she had tried calling 4 times and received no answer. More than once, I discovered my ringer had been silenced. You keep missing calls, Whitney told me sweetly. Maybe we should simplify your phone. Simplify, as though I were a toddler with too many buttons. The worst change came on a Wednesday. I found my belongings packed into boxes. We're moving you downstairs, Whitney announced, to the basement room. It has its own bathroom and gives you more privacy. The basement had no window that opened. It was far from the kitchen, far from the front door, and far from anyone who might stop by and see me. That's kind, I said evenly, but I am comfortable upstairs. It is already decided, she said without changing her smile. Nathan agrees. Don't you, Nathan? My son stood in the doorway and looked at the boxes, then at me. It might be more comfortable, Dad, he said. He did not believe it. I could see that clearly, but he said it anyway. That night, I carried my own boxes down the stairs. With every step, I thought about how neatly Whitney had done it. She had reduced my world piece by piece. My mail, my calls, my connection to my son. Now she wanted me out of sight completely. She believed isolation was the final move, the last wall around a man she had already decided was helpless. She had it exactly backward. For her, the basement was supposed to be a cage. For me, it became the final reason to leave. Sitting there with my folder on my knees, I called Delia and told her it was time. Come home, I said. 2 nights later, Nathan came down to the basement. He had not visited me there before. He stood at the bottom of the stairs holding an envelope, and his hands were unsteady. Dad, he said in a low voice, I found something. I set down my book and asked him to sit. He did not. Instead, he held out the envelope. It was a mortgage statement. My name appeared on it beside his. I asked Whitney about it, he said. She became furious. She told me it was old and did not matter. She said you were confused. He swallowed and looked at the date. But this is from this year, Dad. This month. It's real, I said. You've been paying, he whispered. His face seemed to come apart in slow motion. Then he started listing everything. The house, the cars, the credit line she used. He stopped. How much? Enough, I answered gently. For 8 years. He sat hard on the bottom step, as though his legs had given up. I remember now, he said. The year my business almost failed. You covered everything. You never said a word. Whitney told everyone her savings had rescued us. He gave a sick, quiet laugh. It was you. It was always you. You were struggling, son, I told him. A father does not hand his child a bill. He covered his face with both hands. And I let her lock your food away, he said. I let her put you in a basement. Dad, what have I done? I wanted to cross the room and comfort him. But 4 years in that house had taught me something. You cannot carry a person to shore if he refuses to swim. Nathan had to choose for himself. Look at me, I said. He did. There is a party next Saturday, your housewarming. Whitney's big day. I held his eyes. Whatever happens there, remember one thing. I never stopped being your father. Not once. He nodded with tears on his face. He did not yet know what I planned to do. Before the paperwork became effective, I tried one more time to speak directly with Whitney. I owed it to Nathan, and I owed it to myself. The next morning, I found her in the kitchen, arranging flowers for the party. She did not turn around. Whitney, we need to talk. Can it wait, Saul? I'm overwhelmed. It cannot, I said. Something in my voice made her put down the flowers. She faced me with her arms crossed, and the flat kitchen expression already in place. I know what you have been telling Nathan, I said. That I'm confused. That my memory is failing. I never said that. I also know what you told him about assisted living, and what you asked about my pension. Her expression did not change. That was how I knew it was true. A surprised person looks surprised. Whitney only recalculated. I do not know what Delia has been putting in your head, she said smoothly. But you are not well, Saul. This is exactly what I've been worried about. Paranoia. I am asking you to stop, I said. Treat me like an adult in this house, and we can move forward. Nobody else needs to know anything. Then she smiled, slow and cold, with the kitchen face at full strength. Go ahead and tell people whatever you like. She picked up the flowers again. You are a sweet, forgetful old man who moved in with his son. Everyone can see that. Who do you think Nathan is going to believe? You? She cut another stem. Or me? Then she returned to the arrangement, as though I were no longer there. I stood in the kitchen for a moment. Whitney believed she had won. To her, the whole situation depended on whose story people trusted. She had forgotten that some truths do not require belief. They are printed on paper, dated, signed, and filed. All right, Whitney, I said. Then I left her with the flowers. The party was 5 days away. If you have ever sat quietly at your own table and been made to feel small in a house you helped support, then you understand the silence I am describing. I am not telling this for pity. I am telling it because what happened next taught me something about dignity that I wish I had understood much sooner. Then came the week when everything changed. The housewarming was Whitney's masterpiece. She had planned it for weeks. She wanted the entire street there, the neighbors, her coworkers from the real estate office, and the young pastor who had recently taken over the church down the block. She wanted everyone to walk through her beautiful new house and see how far she had come. You will be there, Saul, she told me. That is not a question. The family should look united, for appearances. I would not miss it, I said. She narrowed her eyes for a second, surprised that I agreed so easily, then returned to the seating chart. For appearances. That was the whole arrangement. I was not family to Whitney. I was part of the scenery, an older man placed in a corner so the picture looked warm. That was fine. I would be there. Marcus had called that morning. The paperwork was ready. Every document had been signed and filed. Only the effective date remained. The effective date was the day of the party. I had not chosen it to be cruel. I chose it because I was finished hiding. Whatever happened in that house, in front of all those people, would happen over ground that had already shifted beneath their feet. The night before the party, I laid out my clothes. I chose the blue shirt Margaret always said brought out my eyes. I pressed it myself the way she had taught me. Looking at it hanging on the closet door, I spoke to her a little, the way I still do. I know, Maggie, I said. I let it go on too long. Then I turned off the light. The next day, I would walk into their party and stop being invisible for good. Delia flew in on the morning of the party. I picked her up at the airport in my own truck without anyone at the house knowing. She hugged me hard at the curb. You look good, Dad, she said. You look like yourself again. I feel like myself again, I answered. We got coffee before heading over. Marcus met us there with the folder and reviewed everything one final time. Everything is in order, he said. The withdrawals are filed and become effective today. Proper written notice went out 30 days ago by certified mail, and someone at the house signed for it. Who signed? Delia asked. Marcus almost smiled. The delivery receipt came back with Whitney Wolcott's signature. She accepted the letter herself and never told Saul. Whitney had signed the notice with her own hand and buried it. She had been warned for a full month and sat on the information because she was certain it meant nothing. So this is real, I said. As of today, my name is off the house and the cars, and the credit line is closed. As of today, Marcus confirmed, you are free and clear, Saul. Whatever remains is theirs to carry. I sat with that for a moment. 8 years of quiet support had finally been set down. You do not have to say anything at the party, Delia told me. You could let the bank explain it later. No, I said. I have been silent in that house for 4 years. I am going to speak once, clearly and in daylight. After that, I will never need to raise my voice. Marcus placed the folder in my hands. Then it is yours to carry now, in more ways than one. Delia squeezed my arm. I will stand beside you. I put on the blue shirt and checked my reflection. I saw a 68-year-old man, tired around the eyes, but standing straight. Then the three of us drove to the party I had been ordered to attend for appearances. I walked in. The house glowed with string lights in the yard, wine on the counter, and 30 people moving between the kitchen and patio. Whitney floated through it all like a queen at her coronation. She wore white. Of course she did. Come in, everyone, she called. Welcome to our home. Our home. The home whose mortgage had carried my name. I stood near the back with Delia. Marcus mingled quietly, looking like any other guest in a good jacket. Pastor Dale Smith was there, shaking hands with his usual kind expression. Carol and the neighbors gathered near the food. Then Whitney spotted me. Her smile flickered before becoming brighter. And there is Saul, she announced to a group of guests. Nathan's father. He lives with us. She said it the way someone might mention a stray they had taken in. One of her coworkers asked how the arrangement was going. Whitney laughed and warmed to her favorite subject. Oh, it's a project, she said. Bless him. We practically feed a second household. You should see him around the pantry. Then she lowered her voice for effect. We actually had to put a lock on it, she said. Otherwise, he would eat us out of house and home. Laughter moved through the group. Several people looked at me with the familiar pity, now mixed with amusement. Portion control, Whitney continued, delighted. It's the only way. At his age, you have to manage them almost like children. Nathan stood at the edge of the group with all the color gone from his face. He watched his wife turn my humiliation into entertainment for strangers. Then he looked at me. Whitney lifted her wine glass and rode the laughter. To family, she said brightly, and to taking care of the ones who cannot take care of themselves. The guests raised their glasses. I stepped into the center of the room. Actually, I said, before we toast, I would like to say something. Every face turned toward me. Whitney's smile remained in place, but her eyes sharpened. Saul, honey, you do not have to. I will be brief, I said. My voice was calm, and it carried. Thank you all for coming. This is a beautiful home. I looked around slowly. I know it well, and I am proud that I helped pay for it. Someone gave a small, confused laugh. Whitney lifted her chin. For 8 years, I continued, I co-signed the mortgage on this house. My name also backed both cars in the driveway and the credit line this family used. My name, my signature, and my good standing helped make all of this possible. The room became quiet in patches, then all at once. He's confused, Whitney interrupted with a light laugh. Saul gets his memories mixed up, she said. It's a condition. Marcus, I called. He stepped out of the crowd, calm as ever. I am Saul's financial advisor, he said. I have worked with him for 20 years. Everything he just said is documented and accurate. I prepared and filed the paperwork myself. Whitney's smile finally slipped. As of this morning, I continued, I have withdrawn my name from all of it. The mortgage, both auto loans, and the credit line. Everything was handled legally, with proper notice delivered 30 days ago by certified mail and signed for at this address. I let the words settle. Signed for, by you, Whitney. Every head turned toward her. That's not true, she began. I never. She looked around at the watching faces. This is a misunderstanding. It is not, I said gently. As of today, everything in this house belongs to the two of you to carry. I wish you well with it. The silence was complete. A wine glass made a small sound as someone set it down. Carol covered her mouth. The pastor stood still and serious. Whitney remained in the center of her perfect party, wearing her white dress, and for the first time since I had known her, she had nothing to say. Whitney recovered quickly. She always did. Everyone, I am so sorry, she said, pressing a hand to her chest while her eyes turned glassy. This is what we have been dealing with. Saul is not well. He turns on the people who care for him. It is heartbreaking. Several guests shifted uncertainly. The performance was practiced. It had worked on Nathan for 3 years. Then Delia stepped beside me. Caring for him? She asked. You locked his food in a cabinet. You posted a feeding schedule on the refrigerator where the neighbors could read it. You moved a 68-year-old man into a basement. People gasped, and Carol's eyes widened. That chart is still on the refrigerator, Delia added. Go read it. His name is printed at the top. 2 neighbors actually walked into the kitchen. They returned with hard expressions. Carol was one of them. It is there, she said quietly. Exactly as Delia described. Whitney opened and closed her mouth. Then Pastor Smith spoke in a gentle but firm voice. Whitney, I have sat with Saul at the community breakfast. Months ago, he told me he felt like a stranger inside his own family, the pastor continued. I confess that I did not understand what he meant until now. Whitney had invited him to bless her lovely home, yet he had already heard enough to recognize the truth. The mood in the room shifted completely. All evening, pity had been aimed at me. Now it turned and settled on Whitney. I did not gloat. There was no joy in it, only the quiet relief of setting down a heavy load. I gave freely for 8 years, Whitney, I said. What is freely given can also be freely stopped. She stared at me, and I watched her understand that no clever story could fix this. The paperwork did not care whose version people believed. Then every eye moved toward Nathan. He stood between us, his wife on one side in her white dress with wet eyes, and his father on the other in a blue shirt with steady hands. The entire room waited. Nathan, Whitney said, making her voice tremble. Tell them the truth about your father. Tell them what we have been going through. He looked at her. Then he looked at the refrigerator, where the feeding schedule still hung with my name at the top. He stared at it for a long time. The truth, he said slowly. Yes, Whitney answered, reaching for his hand. Tell them, honey. Nathan did not take it. The truth is that my father paid for everything, he said. His voice cracked, then steadied. The truth is that he did it quietly for 8 years and never asked for anything. The truth is that I watched my wife lock his food away, and I said nothing. I let him be moved into the basement, and I said nothing. Nathan, Whitney warned. You told me he was losing his mind, he said, turning toward her. Then something in him seemed to stand upright for the first time in years. You told me that so I would stop believing him. He is the sharpest man I know, Nathan continued, and I chose you over him every single time. The room was completely silent. Not tonight, he said. Then he crossed the floor, past his wife and the neighbors, and stopped in front of me. My grown son wrapped his arms around me, the way he had when he was small. I'm sorry, Dad, he whispered against my shoulder. I'm so sorry. I held my boy in the middle of that ruined party. Over his shoulder, I saw Whitney standing alone in her white dress, while the crowd slowly created distance around her. For the first time in 3 years, my son had said no to his wife, and he had said it aloud in front of everyone. The party emptied quickly after that. People suddenly remembered other places they needed to be. Whitney stood near the door, but almost no one stopped long enough to say goodbye. The real consequences arrived in the days that followed. Marcus had been honest with me, and I had been honest with Nathan. Once my name no longer supported the loans, the lender reviewed everything. The mortgage terms changed. The interest rate climbed. The comfortable monthly numbers Whitney had built her life around stopped being comfortable. Nathan called me that week from his kitchen table with a calculator and a stack of bills. "It does not work, Dad," he said quietly. "Not on what we earn. Not even close. The house, the cars, all of it. It was only affordable because of you," he said. "I know, son." Whitney is furious. "She says you did this to ruin us." "I supported you for 8 years without charging you anything," I replied. "Then I gave formal notice a month before changing anything, and she hid that notice from you. I did not ruin your life. I stopped holding up a life you could not afford on your own." He stayed quiet for a long moment. "We will have to sell one of the cars," he said. "Maybe sell the house and move somewhere smaller." "Then that is what you do," I told him. "You live within what belongs to you. There is no shame in that." Whitney does not see it that way. "No," I said. "She would not." The numbers did not lie, and they did not care whose feelings they hurt. For 8 years, Whitney had lived on a foundation she did not know existed and had never once thanked. Now she stood on her own footing, and it could not support the house she wanted. That was the fallout. Nothing dramatic and nothing cruel. Just arithmetic finally telling the truth. Under the pressure of that honest arithmetic, the cracks between Nathan and Whitney became impossible to ignore. Pressure has a way of stripping the paint from people. Underneath, Whitney showed her true grain. Nathan told me about it gradually over coffee at my apartment. Once money became tight, the porch face disappeared for good. There was no audience left to impress, so she stopped pretending. "She blamed me," Nathan said, "for the party, for not controlling you, and for believing you instead of her." He turned his cup in his hands. "She said that if I had handled you properly, none of this would have happened." "Handled me?" I repeated. "That was the exact word," he said. Then he shook his head. "I kept waiting for her to feel sorry about any of it, about the way she treated you. It never came. She was only ever upset about the money." Nathan was finally seeing what Delia and I had seen for a long time. Whitney's warmth had always been a tool, brought out for people who were useful and put away when they were not. "I found the brochures," Nathan told me, "the assisted living places. They were in her desk. She had already chosen one, the cheapest option, 2 hours away. 2 hours was far enough that people would not visit often, and far enough for me to disappear. She was going to send you there," Nathan said, "and keep your pension connected to the house. She had it all planned." He looked up at me, and the last of his illusions had left his face. "I married someone who saw my father as a line in a budget," he said, "and I let her. I did not say I told you so. A person learns little from those words except how to resent the one who says them." "You see her clearly now," I told him. "That is what matters." "I see her," Nathan said. "I finally see her." Whitney did not accept the change quietly. People like her rarely do. She went to work on the neighborhood. Whitney had always been good with a crowd, and she still had a few social threads to pull. She told Carol that I had abandoned my family in their hour of need, humiliated my own son at his housewarming out of spite, and turned against the people who had taken me in. It was a convincing story. A month earlier, it might have worked. But the neighbors had been inside that house. They had read the feeding schedule with their own eyes. They had heard Whitney joke about the pantry lock. They had watched her raise a glass to caring for people who could not care for themselves, while I stood humiliated in the corner. Carol was the one who finally stopped her. Nathan told me what happened. Whitney was standing near the mailboxes telling her version to 2 neighbors when Carol walked over. "Whitney," Carol said loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear, "I stood in your kitchen. I read that chart. I saw you lock food away from that man as though he needed permission to eat," Whitney tried to respond. "No," Carol interrupted. "I helped spread that pantry story at the barbecue. I laughed, and I am ashamed of that. So do not stand here and tell me Saul is the problem. I saw what happened." Then she turned and walked away. The other 2 neighbors followed her. The same woman who had once looked at me with pity over the fence had finally seen everything clearly, and she refused to help the lie continue. Whitney had built much of her power on being believed. Once that disappeared, she had little left. Within a week, she stopped trying, because there was no audience willing to applaud. Then, in the quiet after my son made a choice I had not dared to hope for, Nathan arrived at my apartment on a rainy Tuesday night. "Can I come in?" he asked. I stepped aside. He placed a travel bag beside the door as though he was not sure he had the right to stay. "I moved out," he said. "I told Whitney I need time and space to think. I put the kettle on because I have learned that difficult conversations go more easily when both people have something warm to hold. She said I would regret it," Nathan continued, as he sat at my small table. "She said I was throwing away my marriage because of my father." "And what did you say?" I asked. I told her I had already thrown away my father because of my marriage for 3 years. He looked down at his hands. "I am finished choosing wrong." I set 2 mugs on the table, and steam rose between us. "Dad, I keep replaying everything," he said. "Every dinner when I stayed quiet. The basement, the lock. You helped pay for the roof over my head, and I let her treat you like a burden beneath it." His voice broke. "How can you even look at me?" he asked. "Because you are my son," I answered. "That was never in question. Not once. I do not deserve that." "Grace is not about deserving," I told him. If it were, none of us would receive any. He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, embarrassed to be 34 and crying at his father's table. I do not want to be the man who watches something wrong and does nothing, he said. Not anymore. Then do not be that man, I said. You already stood up once in front of everyone. It may be the hardest thing you ever do, and you did it. The rest is practice. He almost laughed. You make it sound simple. It is not simple, I replied, but it is not complicated either. You stop surrendering, one day at a time. He lifted his mug with both hands, the way he had when he was a boy. For the first time in years, we simply talked. Not long after that, I found a small apartment across town near a park, about 10 minutes from Delia when she was in the state. It had 2 bedrooms, plenty of light, and a kitchen, just large enough. There was no lock on the pantry. There never would be. I could eat what I wanted, when I wanted. I made real breakfasts and ate a cookie whenever I felt like having one. That may sound like a small freedom, but after someone takes it away, it no longer feels small. Nathan visited most weeks. We rebuilt slowly, the way I once restored old furniture, one careful pass at a time. Some visits became easy, others were still heavy. That was honest, and I had learned to value honesty. At one point, Nathan asked me to help with the debt. He was clear that he did not want me to take it back onto my shoulders. He only wanted help understanding the numbers, making a plan, and getting out of the situation the right way. So the 3 of us sat down with Marcus and created a real plan. Nathan sold the second car and began talking with the lender about moving into a smaller place he could afford on his own. Your father could just cover it, Whitney had once told him. He has the money. Nathan told her no. He shared that with me later, and he was proud of the answer. I will help you learn to swim, I told my son. I will not carry you underwater anymore. That is not love. I know that now. He nodded because he understood. That was the difference between Nathan and the woman he had married. He could hear a difficult truth and grow from it. The carrying was over. The 8 years of silence were over. But when I finally stopped rescuing my son, I did not lose him. I got him back. That, it turned out, was the only thing I had ever truly been paying for. Nathan and Whitney divorced the following spring. The process was quieter than I expected. There was not much left to argue over after the house was sold and the debts were divided. Whitney landed on her feet, as people like her often do. The last I heard, she moved 2 towns away and married a widower who owned his house outright. I wish him well, and I hope he reads every document before signing it. I do not hate Whitney. That surprised me. I thought I would. But resentment is another heavy thing to carry, and I am finished carrying weight that does not belong to me. Whitney taught me something, though not in the way she intended. She taught me that kindness without a backbone is not always kindness. Sometimes it becomes an invitation for other people to take more while calling your silence agreement. For 8 years, I mistook my silence for love. It was not. It was fear wearing love's coat. Fear that I would lose my son if I ever asked for anything in return. The truth is that my silence almost cost me my son anyway. Speaking up saved us. Nathan is different now. He is lighter, laughs the way he did as a boy, and stands straight again. Last month, he disagreed with me about something small, a call during a baseball game, and said it directly to my face without flinching. I nearly cried at the dinner table over a baseball argument because my son had found his backbone again. Delia calls this my second act. She says many men my age are winding down while I am starting over, free and clear, with my boy beside me. Maybe she is right. The lock came off the pantry. The lie came off my son. The weight came off my back. A man who had spent 8 years making himself smaller finally stood at his full height again, at 68, in a kitchen with the cupboards wide open. As I finish telling this story, it is Sunday morning. Low, golden light comes through my kitchen window. Nathan is on his way over, and I hear his car pull into the lot. He has a key now. He uses it and walks in like someone who belongs somewhere. Morning, Dad, he calls. Coffee is ready, I answer. I pour him a cup, then pour one for myself, and open the pantry to get the sugar. For a moment, I simply stand there looking at the shelves. They are full. There is no lock, no chart, and no name taped above the handle, telling me what I am allowed to have. It is only a cupboard in a home that is mine, open to a man who is welcome in it. That man is me. Finally, me. Nathan sits at the little table where we have done so much healing. He tells me about his week and a project at work, animated and fully present. The son I raised has returned from wherever he had been hiding. I set the sugar on the table and watch my boy talk. Then I think about Margaret and how much she would have loved this morning. Nathan laughing, me standing straight, and the pantry open. The pantry in my new home does not have a lock. It never will. A person who knows his own worth should never have to ask permission to sit at his own table. I spent 8 years forgetting that. I have however many years remain to remember it, and I intend to. Pass the sugar, son, I say. Nathan smiles and slides it toward me. The morning is good.